Hello, today I'm going to be presenting my final project paper, and I chose the option of a research proposal for this final project. And I've combined the research and writing that I've done in the first two papers of the class on the spiral of silence theory. And with this research proposal, I will be looking at ways that further research can be done on this theory to see how it works specifically in our current saturated digital media world that we live in and how this theory operates in digital spaces specifically. So this research is very important for where we're at in history and time with how media has progressed and evolved from its traditional roots to what we have now. And in a world that is very encouraging towards online expression, at the same time, people seem to be increasingly fearful of criticism and retribution that they could face for voicing their opinions online. So the spiral of silence theory essentially claims that individuals will suppress their minority opinions to avoid social isolation, comparison, and criticism online. And this grows more relevant as social media saturates our culture. So despite social media being praised as this platform for free speech, it seems like a lot of people are more scared now than ever to share their honest thoughts. So this paradox really affects people across various genders, political parties, and religions, which makes it really important to understand how digital spaces amplify or reduce this phenomenon. So to first understand the spiral, it starts with the fear of isolation. If people feel that their views are different from the majority or unpopular, they will fear social rejection if they share those opinions. It next goes to self-censorship, which after that fear is felt, people will refrain from expressing their minority opinion publicly. For perceived dominance, majority viewpoints can appear to be more widespread, more intense, and more forceful than maybe they actually are in reality. And this is especially true with social media. And lastly, it just reinforces silence. So this cycle continues, which further suppresses diverse and different perspectives. So Elizabeth Noel Newman first introduced this theory in 1974, and back then she emphasized how the mass media was already shaping perceptions of public agreement. And the spiral creates a very circular process where silence just brings on more silence, and the circle or the spiral never fully comes to a close. So some key research themes within this paper. First, I look at the theoretical foundation. I use the original spiral of silence theory, as well as some others, to do a meta-analysis that confirmed this theory's validity. So it perceived support influences, willing to speak out, their effects that vary by context and population. For cross-cultural application, it seems that collectivist cultures show stronger signs of the spiral of silence tendencies than individualist cultures, which really highlights how cultural norms shape expression and the voicing of opinions. With the digital media evolution, online anonymity sometimes reduces fear, but self-censorship still persists when it seems like views are in the minority. And so this leads to the spiral adapting, but not completely disappearing. And lastly, with a strong algorithm influence, platform algorithms filter content and structure our perceptions of majority opinion. And so adding new technological dimensions and evolutions to this theory really enhances it and makes it that much more important. So the digital paradox that we see within this theory shows us that social media creates a very heightened sense of visibility and potential backlash, which reinforces the spiral of silence even when platforms do allow anonymity and broader participation. Even though social media has this branding of a platform to express opinion, if someone feels like their opinion or their beliefs are in the minority compared to most of their friends or the general population, it makes them fearful to post or say anything that they really want to. So within this paradox, we see two different sides of it. First, we know that social media does have the power to amplify voices. Platforms are designed for expression, and broader reach and participation comes along with that, as well as the formation of more diverse communities online. The other side of the paradox is where the spiral of silence comes in, where there's a silencing dissent. So cancel culture is very prevalent, and that allows criticism to thrive, which can be scary when you know you may put yourself up to being canceled by whatever your opinion or your thoughts may be. So algorithms tend to amplify majority views as well. And visibility can increase a higher risk of backlash, which leads to minority perspectives being marginalized and not as viewed or not as listened to or just more ignored or criticized. So some research findings across different contexts. I put together this little timeline here that shows the formation of the original spiral of silence theory in 1974 and how the research that I did in my literature review pulled together this sort of timeline of how this theory persists and evolves through the changing of mass media platforms. And it ends with where we're at now in the algorithm era. And a lot of these studies examined how platform algorithms and partisan media and individual comments can shape perceptions of consensus in digital spaces specifically. So in my research proposal, I propose a study that would really get down to the bottom of the spiral of silence, find specific factors within social media usage, various platforms, age, and race demographics that may cause the spiral to be more prominent or less prominent based on those factors. So the research problem at hand explains that despite there being many abundant platforms that encourage expression, users tend to self-censor when they know that their views are different from the perceived majority. Researchers so far have disagreed on whether digital platforms reduce or heighten the spiral of silence effect. So the purpose of my proposed study would be to investigate how the spiral of silence theory operates on social media specifically, and whether digital environments tend to intensify or weaken this phenomenon. So within my methodology, I propose that a mixed methods design, which would combine quantitative surveys and qualitative interviews, could help us to measure perceived opinion climate, levels of fear of isolation, and an overall willingness to express opinions. The 4 critical research questions that I developed look at different corners of this theory and aim to answer the questions that come up. So the first one asks, how does perceived online opinion climate influence a user's willingness to express their minority viewpoints? Second, I asked, does fear of social isolation predict self-censorship in digital spaces? How do platform characteristics influence the spiral of silence process? And are younger digital users more or less susceptible to the spiral of silence online? So these 4 questions, in my opinion, represent 4 different important cornerstones to this theory that research still needs to be developed within, and studies still need to be done to really get down to the root of these questions and understand this theory now that we are in such a developed and modernized mass media climate. So the framework of this study, with the theoretical framework, it's investigated through these 3 theories listed here. So first, of course, the spiral of silence theory, the original one, but I also wanted to use the online disinhibition effect, which will help to understand digital behavior specifically, and as well as public opinion perception models to track media evolution to digitalization. This theory is rooted in public opinion generally, and so using any kind of tool to measure public opinion levels, participation, etc., I feel is necessary. And some key limitations of the study would look like self-report bias in survey responses, which is always a limitation with any study using participant surveys, as well as online sample limitations and representation. Rapidly evolving platforms can also pose measurement challenges with how fast things develop and grow now, and a need for diverse samples across opinions and content is necessary, and that could be a limitation if it is not reached. So, looking forward, we know that the spiral of silence remains a very powerful framework that understands opinion expression from traditional to digital context. Research demonstrates the enduring relevance of fear of isolation and perceived majority opinion in shaping public disclosure. So some future directions for research can look like comparative studies across cultures and platforms, long-term tracking of digital spiral of silence processes, and the examination of AI-driven personalization effects. So this research proposal does have democratic implications. I personally want to understand the algorithmic curation's long-term consequences for general democratic discussion and finding solutions that will help to promote honest and respectful discourse online. And lastly, I'll close with this quote from my research proposal that says, in a country that allows free speech with endless platforms to exercise that right, we must understand why we're more scared now than ever before to share, and we must find ways to break the spiral of silence. Thank you.